paid my dues, time after time. I've done my
Hello
sentence
again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I'm coming back
written
at you with
with a
another
line.
wargaming and miniature video. In this
I've made
video, what we're going to be talking
mistakes,
about is how to get started
I've made a
in
few.
miniature wargaming. This is going to be how to, like, what you need to get started, what you need to consider, how to plan for it, what you need to do to get started. Um, it This video is it's aimed towards people who are not already wargaming. This video is aimed towards people who have seen people wargaming, have seen their friends wargaming, they've watched some wargaming channels, they're thinking about getting into it themselves, they haven't really decided, or they're unsure or scared to take the plunge into miniature wargaming. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little something about my history and how I got started in wargaming. I'm going to try to cut this down and make this as short and sweet as possible. And then I've got written down 5 things that I think you should consider. Okay, let me back that up. I've got 5 bullet points that I think you need to consider. And in each of these bullet points, I've got about 5 or 6 things that you need to consider. So, uh, there's actually quite a bit, okay? This video might be an hour, 2 hours, 10-hour long video. No, I don't think so. But if it's a long video and you can't watch it all in one sitting, don't. Break it up. Watch it 2 or 3 times. You know, watch what you can. Share it with your friends. If you've got friends that are thinking about getting into miniature gaming, but they are not sure, or you're not sure how to convince them or tell them or explain to them how or what they need to do to get involved in miniature wargaming, then reference this material here if it helps. If it doesn't help, then of course no. Okay, so let me tell you about Mr. Everything, right? Okay, so I'm a kid and I'm growing up in New Orleans. I'm in high school. Uh, my cousin introduced me into this world of role-playing games. I had already been a board gamer because in my community there was a store that sold uh, collectible figures like Star Wars figures because Star Wars had just come out. It was like 77, 76, 77 when I started getting into board gaming. About that time, a movie came out called The Lord of the Rings. It was a rotoscoped version of Lord of the Rings. I had gotten into that, or I watched that with my cousin when we went to go visit him. Then he showed me this game that he was playing that allowed him to play in the world of, fantasy. And so I was like, ooh, that's really cool. So that's pretty much what got me started into role-playing games. But let's back up. I was only into, at the time, board games. And when I say board games, I'm talking about like Tactics, um, Tactics 2, not Tactics, Tactics 2, Blitzkrieg, the Third Reich. Squad Leader was brand new. It just came out. I had to jump on that because that was really sexy. And these were chit and board counter games. And I was digging it. And that basically made me a war gamer, right? There wasn't any real computer gaming. TRS-80 was just coming out like, it hadn't even come out, right? So remember, this is back in 1977. So here I am. I'm playing board games with my friends, and one of my friends and I decide we're going to go to a convention, right? A wargaming role playing, because we play D&D. So we're like, we're going to go to the role playing convention. Well, it was in Dallas. We got our parents to pay for a plane ticket. We flew out to Dallas. We got a hotel room, and we went to this convention, right? And we played all kinds of games. Well, here it comes. I see this guy. He's got these miniature tanks, World War II, the exact same ones that I've got in my Squad Leader game, M4 Sherman, Matilda. That's when I learned the Matilda. Matilda was pretty badass. So we got the Matilda, and then the Panzer IVs and the Panthers and all that stuff I was remembering from Squad Leader. But he had model tanks. He had trees, he had hills, he had roads and cities set up, little men on, and then I was watching this game and wasn't playing because I didn't know what was going on. I was in amazement at the 3D hills and the trees and everything. I was like, wow, that looks so beautiful. It looks so cool. And then this guy had so much energy. He was animated. He was like, all right, guys, da 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 da. He was like bouncing around and helping everybody out. Everybody around the table was having a good old time. Everybody yelling and screaming at each other. But it wasn't malicious. It was like everybody. It's like everybody was cheering on, their teammates and cursing their opponents, but all in good nature. And this was the door, the window, this was the what are they called? Gateway into miniature wargaming. So here I am, this high school kid, didn't have any money, played every now and then, like once a month or once every other month, I would buy a board game to play because I was desperately into wargaming. I went to this convention, saw this miniature game, and I'm going to tell you, I saw how much fun everybody was having. I saw how beautiful the table looked, and it just made me want to get involved in miniature wargaming. So when I went back home to New Orleans, went to my local game store, and they had some miniature games there. They had Angriff, they had Tractics, they even had tank charts, and I was like, these are all super old games. And so I was like, I picked a couple of those up. I saw that they had some miniatures, some CNC tanks, and I was getting into this micro armor thing, right? And then Squad Leader, Advanced Squad Leader, or maybe it was Squad Leader, came out with this giant hex boards where you could use the micro armor on the Squad Leader. It was like a transition thing. I didn't like that because the reason why you get into miniature games is not to play them on hexes. Yes, there's something out there called BattleTech, but BattleTech and any other game that is three-dimensional that you play on a grid is not a miniature war game. It's still a board game because you're playing on a board. You just have your counters are Monopoly counters. They're three-dimensional pieces you're moving around on a grid. That's not a war game. Okay, so well, it is a war game, but it's not a miniature war game. So I wanted to get into this miniature wargaming stuff. So I got the game, I got some miniatures, got my friends to play, we came up with some scenarios. We didn't know what we were doing. I'm telling you, we did not know what we were doing. I messed up, bought a bunch of stuff I didn't need, bought, excessive. I was broke, I couldn't afford anything. And I didn't really have anybody in my community or in my gaming area that could help me. I bet you there was, but I was too shy or I didn't know how or who to contact to find this information out. So if I know now what I knew then, I would have done it completely differently. So knowing this is my gift to you. I'm going to explain to you what the best way to do it, or what you need to consider and how you need to make your decisions before you get into military. I said military. Wait, those decisions before you get into miniature wargaming, because it's a major undertaking. Okay, you need to be prepared for this. Don't think getting into miniature gaming is like going and buying an Xbox game, because it's not. I will say this before I get into going over my bullet points here. I play computer games. I play, World of Tanks, War Thunder. I play Steel Battalions. I play Rome, Napoleonics. I play a bunch of stuff on the computer. but because I'm into all those different genres or those time periods. Now, if I play those on the tabletop, I will tell you, in a miniature game compared to a computer game, there is no comparison. The miniature game, the whole hobby, is so much more rewarding and so much more fulfilling than a computer game. Computer games, yes, I understand. I still play them today. They're time killers. Like, you get in, you play a couple of missions, and then you do your work, or you do your chores, or you go to dinner, or whatever. You come home, maybe right before you go to bed, you log into the computer, you play a mission or two of something, and then you log out, right? Unless you're a super heavy duty dedicated computer gamer like I am. But those games are not, computer games tend not to be fulfilling. But miniature games are, and one of the reasons why that is because of all these bullet points I'm about to explain. There's something visceral. You have a three-dimensional item in your hands, tactile. You can touch it, you can see it, you can turn it, you can rotate it, you can visualize the entire table. You have an opponent that is right there in your grill where you can actually interact with this person. You can laugh, you can yell, you can scream. You can actually see the dice. When you're rolling the dice on a computer, you don't ever see those dice. They're inside the mechanics of the game, where on the table you get to see chance, right? When you go home before the game, you get to work on your models. You're building the models. You're doing research on what the models represent and how you need to paint them. And then you go to paint them and you assemble them as in model kits. You trim them. You build terrain for your tabletop. You're actually having to research maybe the strategy and tactics of certain armies from history. That's miniature wargaming, not just fighting on the table, not just pushing figures across the table and rolling dice. That's probably 10% of miniature wargaming. The other 90% is the preparation for that game. And that is what is fulfilling. Okay, so let's talk about some of the things you need to do. Okay, I'm going to talk generically. I'm going to talk generically about wargaming and not about any specific game, because it applies, what I'm about to tell you applies to all miniature war games. All of them. Okay, there's not one what I'm about to talk about doesn't apply to it. So I'm going to call this How to Military War Game 101. Okay, so how do you get into wargaming? Well, you probably have had a friend that said, hey, let's get into wargaming. Or you probably saw some videos, or you probably saw some people playing like I did, or you probably watched one of my videos of me painting some figures, or who knows? There's a million different ways. Maybe you read a book about wargaming. I even got one of those over there. So maybe the list goes on. There's infinite ways that you could possibly get introduced into wargaming. But usually, and this is what I see across the board, remember, I'm an old man, and I've been wargaming since the 70s. What is this, 40 years, 50 years? No, it can't be 50 years. It's at least 30 years of wargaming, right? So maybe 40 years of wargaming. So, wow, it's been that long. But okay. Take what I'm about to say and run with it. Most likely, you're being introduced into wargaming because you have a friend that also wargames. And maybe he's a new friend. Maybe he says, hey, Bill, Have you ever played miniature wargaming? Boom, you just got introduced to military wargaming. Or maybe he's saying, hey, hey buddy, have you ever played Warhammer 40K? Or have you ever played a Navy battle? Or whatever. And you're like, no, let me check it out. And you check it out. That's 99% of the ways you get introduced is by someone you know introducing you. Hopefully that someone, well, that someone might be you. You might be the one introducing your friend into it. If so, refer them back to this video. Or you might be that guy that was told about wargaming by your friend, but you're here trying to find out more or trying to fill in the blanks because maybe your friend didn't explain it thoroughly enough or something like that. And if I miss something, if I'm not thorough, I'm sorry. All right, so here's some things to consider. If you're trying to get into military, I always call it military wargaming, but really what I'm trying to say is miniature gaming because like let's use Warhammer Fantasy Battles as an example. That is not wargaming in the strictest sense, but it is kind of wargaming. It is definitely miniature gaming. Okay, so man, that bright light that I've got shining is really hitting my eyes. And it's like you know how you magnifying glass. But that's okay. All right, enough of that. You have to decide what there's going to be a lot of introspective, right? You're going to have to look inside yourself and evaluate your own opinions, your own motivations. And as I go through this, put yourself in these shoes, and you have to do thinking. That's another thing. I'm just going to say this before I continue on. I know I've said a lot of things before I continue on. Military or miniature wargamers, just tabletop miniature wargamers tend to be, or even board gamers, some of the new board games or any of those games, any game that does not involve a computer, an Xbox, a PlayStation, a Wii, a Sega, any of those games, if it doesn't involve those and you're into wargaming, you're probably smart. You're probably more intelligent than people that don't play war games. If you're trying to get into wargaming, it's probably because those computer games, those PlayStation games, are not fulfilling enough. They might be challenging, they might be tough, that boss is super hard to kill, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you're not getting anything out of it. You're not learning anything, and being that you're probably a smarter individual, you're trying to challenge your intellect, subconsciously maybe even. And that's why wargaming appeals to you. And that's why it appeals to most people, because you have to do your own math. You have to do your own measurements. You have to do it all yourself. On a computer, you don't. The computer does it all for you. I'm pointing over there because that's where my computer is. Okay. And if you ever see me glancing over there, I'm looking at the screen on my computer to make sure that I'm still in frame and all that. Okay. And because I like looking at myself over there. No, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, so now that pre-show is over with, let's talk about it. You have to think about this. Okay, here's where it actually starts. This is the preparation for wargaming or miniature gaming. You're preparing yourself. What do I like? This is what you're thinking. What type of wargaming miniatures am I excited about? Am I excited about the English Knights in Agincourt? Am I excited about the Macedonian Alexander the Great? Am I excited about Robin Hood? Am I excited about, I don't know, the American Civil War? Am I excited about the Japanese Marines hitting the beach on the, Iwo Jima? Am I excited about airplanes? Am I excited about ships? Am I excited about tanks, infantry? Am I excited about elephants or chariots? Or am I excited about laser rifles and plasma guns and power armor? Or do I want dragons on the table with unicorns and pixies on the table? What excites me, right? This is something you have to think about. What kind of miniatures are you planning on getting? What kind of game are you looking for? Are you looking for a game that allows you to have massive Napoleonic armies and you play out a battle like Waterloo? Or do you want to play a game where you only have a squad of World War II paratroopers that have to take a building? So what I'm just trying to say, let me back up. You're looking for the genre. You're looking for a period that you can focus in on. A period now is what I'm talking about, like time frame. So you can look through history and say, I really like the whole period of antiquity where I love like the Romans and the barbarians, Carthaginians, Numidians, I even like Macedonian, the Greek phalanx. Okay, let's say that's the kind of what really turns you on. Great. Okay, so now you've got your genre, like what you're aiming for. You could also be like me. I like a variety of periods. I do. I like the ancient periods, but not as far back as biblical. I don't want any Egyptians or Hittites. I don't want that. But I do want like the Greeks and the Persians. I want the Romans and the Carthaginians. I want the Gauls. I want the British. I want that whole time period, even the Roman Civil War. I love that. Further on down the line, Napoleonics. I love that period, that whole period. I love the American War of Independence, very similar to Napoleonics, but done on a very different level. I love that. That style of fighting is the same as the Civil War, American Civil War. Do I like that? No, it doesn't even, I'm not even like really interested in this American Civil War. Do I like World War II? Absolutely. Do I like World War I? Not so much. Not really. I mean, I like the airplanes, but that's about it. World War II, Navy, absolutely. Planes, tanks, infantry, love it all. Love the entire thing about World War II. I love future. I love sci-fi. I love fantasy. I like dragons and undead running around the battlefield. Absolutely. So you have to decide, like, and I would focus. If you're just getting started, kind of pick one, just to get started. Don't spread yourself too thin. I did this when I was early and it kind of ruined me. But pick one. And I'm just going to use, throughout this video, I'm just going to use the Roman time period in most of my examples. But this applies, remember, this applies to any era. So you pick your genre. I'm thinking to myself, antiquity, Romans and all that stuff. Okay, good. Mark that off. Check that. Check. Right? Now the next one you have to think about is the game, right? You have to choose, and this, all these, when I give you a bullet point, like this bullet point here that I'm going over, the preparation for deciding, none of this has to be done in a strict order. You could pick a game first, and then it might cover multiple genres, and then you pick one of those genres in that game. That's possible. Or you might have a genre, and then you see a bunch of games that you like. What I'm going to recommend to you is research those games, watch some people, ask some questions. Your friend might be playing that game, and if that's the case, get that game. Now, when you get that game, and I'm just going to use, remember I said, I'm just going to use Hail Caesar as an example. This is only one of a billion games out there. So you choose your game. You know your genre, antiquity, right? Now, the next step is scale. You have to choose a scale. Most games on the market, 99% of the games, if not all of them, tell you what scale they recommend for their game. If you don't know what scale is, what I'm talking about is the size of your figure. It's usually measured in millimeters. Sometimes it's measured in a fraction of an inch. So, like, or a fraction, a ratio. So you might have like 1/72 figure. Okay, what does that mean? Well, that means 1 inch tall figure represents a 72-inch tall figure. 72 inches is 6 feet. So 1 inch would be 6 feet. You might have a 25 millimeter figure. What does that mean? Well, that means they measure the figure with millimeters, and they say that should be about the size of a human being. Okay, it might be 28s, it might be 30s, it might be 6, 15, even 54 millimeter. The most popular scale on the market today is 25-28 millimeter. D&D figures, 28 millimeter. Hail Caesar, 28 millimeter. Warhammer 40K, 28 millimeter. Bolt Action, 28 millimeter. Now the second most popular scale, super popular, is 15 millimeter. You'll hear most people have a 15 millimeter army of this or 15 millimeter army of that. And then you'll have other people say, well, I've got a 28 millimeter army of this or a 28 millimeter army of that. Okay, so what they're talking about is how big their models are. Your opponent, if your friend is playing in 15 millimeter, you might strongly consider playing or collecting 15 millimeter models so that your armies can play on the same table, because there's no game out there that I know of where you can bring a 15 millimeter army and I can bring a 28 millimeter army and we play against each other. Doesn't work that way. You have to have the same scale. It's really a no-brainer, but I had to say it just in case. Okay, so choose a scale. If you don't already have a club or a group that you're trying to play with and they're playing in a certain scale, then in that case, use the recommended scale in the game, because usually the game will recommend a scale. Hail Caesar recommends 28 millimeter. Okay. There's a second part to scale. Scale is a double-edged sword. This is something to consider. Scale of the figure usually means, it's definitely the size of the figure, but also means who manufactures those figures. Not every manufacturer makes every scale. Not every army is in every scale figure. So let's say you want to play a Indian army from the Macedonian Alexander the Great time period, right? I bet you can't find that in 28 millimeter. Or if you do, you're going to be limited on the number of different figures you'll have in your army. You might have a dozen different figures. And to me, that's not enough. You definitely find it in 1/72 because I think everything's in 1/72. But 15 millimeter, I guarantee it, you'll be able to find an army in 15 millimeter. You'd have to find the manufacturer that makes it. 15 millimeter is like the most prevalent, but that doesn't make it better. The figures are smaller, which means you have to look at the figures like, oh my gosh, there's the figure down there. If you want to paint, you got to paint these smaller figures. It's not harder, it's just less detail. I find that 28 millimeter figures have more detail, so it just means you get to put a lot more stuff on a 28 millimeter figure. 15 millimeter figure, because it's of its size, you don't. Okay, so you're picking scale. Cost of those figures vary. So you can find a number of 15 millimeter figures for X cost. You can find a number of 28 millimeter figures for Y cost. Is that something that's really going to impact you? It can. If you're playing a game like Bolt Action and you only need like 30 figures, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. That's like 30 figures for a war game is like pennies. Don't worry about it. But if you're playing a game like Waterloo and you're going to need a couple of thousand figures, playing it in 15 millimeter might be the way to go. First of all, you're moving big units around and on a big, huge table, so you might want smaller units so that you can fit them all in. And the cost of a 15 millimeter unit compared to a 28 millimeter unit would be a double the price, basically. Okay, so you got to really consider that. All right. Second part to scale. That was just part of the figure size. The second part to scale is, do you want to play a game that is man-to-man, where every figure represents one figure and they move around individually? Or do you want to play a game that is, I have a regiment of guys in their little companies and I'm moving blocks of companies around, and we're like taking the farmhouse and we're taking the river and the bridge over here? More of a tactical game. Or do you want to play a strategic level game where I've got a block of guys and that represents a full brigade of 1,000 men, and I'm not taking a farmhouse, I'm not taking a bridge, I'm taking a village, or I'm taking a city, or I'm taking a bridge, but or a hill and the wood line and stuff like that. So do you want it? And I'm flanking around with divisions, not just my little battalion. So think about it. Do you want to play a man-to-man game like Bolt Action, where I'm moving every individual man and I'm taking a building and I'm putting guys in the building and they're looking out the windows, and when I roll to shoot, each individual guy shoots? Love Bolt Action. Awesome game. Or am I trying to play a game where it's tactical, so it's like mid-range game, or am I trying to play a strategic level game where I'm actually moving around huge quantities of guys over a large map? Things like this that's part of scale. That's a different scale, but it's the scale of the battle. Once you know like what turns you on, you know that time period that you love. You know the scale of figure you're shooting for because you've thought about the rule set, and the rule set recommends a certain scale, plus your friends recommend a certain scale, and you know about how many figures you need because of the scale of the battle you're doing, and the rules will guide you with that too, because the rule set you choose will dictate what kind of a battle it is, what scale battle it is. Okay, so far so good. Now the last thing about preparation is picking an army, or multiple armies, but picking an army that you want to build miniatures for. I don't want to build an army of Skaven, because I'm just not into that. I'm not into rats or whatever. That just doesn't excite me. Would I do undead? Absolutely, because that's cool. In my opinion, I like mummies and vampires and ghouls and zombies and skeletons, and yeah, that's cool. Would I build an army of Romans? Yes, absolutely. Would I build an army of Hittites? No, I'm not into that period. So you have to decide which army are you going to build. What kind of excites you? Does the Romans excite you? Okay. Now you know you're going to get a Roman army, 28 millimeter for Hail Caesar, and I'm going to play with like 300 points. Okay. Okay, so that's one bullet point. That's just preparation. I'm just going to put a line right through it. That means you know now you're focused in on, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Okay, what do you need to get started? Well, I recommend, if you're going to play a game, get the rules. Don't rely on your friend having a copy of the rules and always coming to the game having to borrow his books. That's being a dick. You should have your own rules. Now, if your gaming club pitches in and buys like a copy of the rules so everybody can use it, that's one thing. Because then now you're all pitching in for that, and that's cool. But if one guy brings his book, you need to bring your book. Let me say this, it's etiquette. It's wargaming etiquette. You have your own rule book. You know about your army. Don't rely on your friend having the army book and you design your army based on his army book. That's not cool. Get the army book. Even if you have to take his book and photocopy it, that's not cool because that's not helping the game company make the game. But in a pinch, or if you just want to do it to get yourself started, go ahead and photocopy it. And then later, maybe a month later down the road, get the book yourself. I kind of went on a tangent there, and I'm sorry. Let's continue on. You know what you need to prepare to get the game, and you got the book. You know what army you're going to do. You know what scale you're going to do. Now you have to just do it. So what does that mean? Well, before you can do anything, you're going to need some tools. Because miniature wargaming relies on little plastic or metal miniatures, a lot of times these miniatures come with mold lines, like the figures are put into a mold and the lead or the plastic squirts through because the molds aren't perfectly, they're not so tight that the plastic or the lead squirts between the front and the back half. When that happens, you see this mold line down the arm or the leg or something like that. So you're going to need ways to remove that. A lot of times I'll use like an X-Acto knife, a hobby knife of some kind. Get a hobby knife. A lot of times these model companies will have an arm that's not attached. Why? Because it's in some kind of crazy pose or something and it would never fit in the mold. So they had to mold the arm separately, which means you have to glue it to him. So you need glue. Okay, a lot of people use super glue. I use E6000. There's people that use Gorilla Glue. It's still a super glue. Or any Zap-A-Gap. There's all different kinds of glue that you could use, right? Epoxy, whatever kind of glue. But super glue is like the super most popular one. Don't use like model glue on a metal figure because that's for plastic only. Okay, so, but if you have plastic models, definitely use plastic glue if you want. But I use E6000. Everybody uses super glue or whatever. There's a bunch of other glues. You'll need a glue and find the glue that works for you best to glue these models together. Okay, but you'll be gluing things other than just arms. You'll be gluing heads and shields and weapons, and if you ever have like vehicles, you'll have to glue like treads and wheels and turrets, and you'll be doing a lot of gluing. Okay, but before you do gluing, you're going to have that knife to make sure you trim, because that arm that's supposed to fit in the arm socket might have a bunch of junk on the arm that won't allow it to fit in there. So you got to trim it, you're going to scrape it, you got to get rid of all that extra mold junk. And once you do that, you'll also need paint. Okay, I recommend, personally, I use a spray primer to coat my models, and that allows, when I go to paint, it sticks to that primer. A lot of times, especially some of the old pewter models, would soak up the paint. It's like a porous metal, and it would absorb the paint into the model. So the primer would help prevent that. And there's painting techniques. Different color primers do different effects on the paint that you're using. A lot of people are using like acrylic water-based paints. That's kind of the thing of the future because it's non-toxic. But then there's still those modelers out there using enamels, but that's usually model builders, like people that just make a model plane to put on the shelf on a display. Those are the guys that are still using enamels. People that wargame usually don't use enamels. It's almost always acrylics. One reason why that is because when you're playing war games, you're always handling the models, so you want them to be non-toxic. All right. And that's why a lot of the companies got away from lead and they've gone to pewter in their figures for that exact same reason. Okay, now before you paint, you'll have to wash these figures. Now I'm going into model building 101, and that's not what I'm trying to do here, but you will need to wash your miniatures. So guess what? You need soap, and but that's not really what you'll need to collect, because I'm sure you got soap in the house or whatever. I use hand soap to clean my miniatures. Okay, so you'll need paint. So paint is I'm going to tell you right now, I've got paint that I've had for 20 years. As long as you seal it up and you save it, some paint bottles will last forever. Some paint will dry up and harden up depending on how you store it or what kind of bottles they're in, and you have to replace them. Because if you don't, like, you buy a color of paint, you use it once or twice, you put it up because you'll never need that color again. Then 10 years down the line, you say, oh man, I really need that weird color of green. You go for it and it's all dried up. That happens. Okay, be prepared for that. It happens. So I recommend not getting any paint until you know what colors you need. And determining what colors you need will be my next bullet point. Okay, so keep that in mind when we go to the next bullet point. So you'll need glue, and I say glues plural because different glues for different occasions. I use a lot of PVA / white glue when I do my terrain. So like when I'm building, when I'm adding grass to a base, or like flock on a base, or if I'm building like a big building or a hill or something like that, I will use PVA glue to put the flock on there or to assemble it. But when I'm going to build a model, I will use either super glue or E6000. You'll just have to figure out what glues, and that's part of hobby building. But you'll have multiple glues is what I'm trying to say. Multiple different types of glues for different instances or occurrences. You might prefer to use clippers. I'm going to say clippers have saved my model building time, plastic model building that is, immensely. I used to take an X-Acto knife and cut individual pieces off of sprues, but now I can just take a hand clipper and go clip, 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 and all these pieces come off. And it saves so much time. I recommend it. They're not that expensive. They're like $6, and you can get clippers, and clippers are going to help you out. You don't even know. Okay. Okay. And you'll need flock. Okay. Flock for when you put that grass on the base. There are players, and I'm going to recommend that you not be one of these players. There are players out there that won't paint their models. They won't prime their models. They won't put any flock on their bases. They're pushing models that on the table that they didn't put any love into. And I'm going to go back up to before bullet point 1. I'm going to go back to bullet point 0. Why do you play a miniature game? Why? You don't play it because of the strategy. You can get that from a computer game. Really. You don't play it for the interaction with the players. You can play PvP or you can have Discord up and interact with people. That's not why you play it. You play it because it's three-dimensional and it's a beautiful table. I'm telling you, and because you have to, you want to do the research. You want to do the painting. You want to have a beautiful army. That's why you play miniature games. You don't play miniature games to bring ugly models to a table and push them around to win a tournament. If you do, then guess what? You're that guy. Okay. All right, backing up. So, you're going to need brushes. And I say plural on the brushes. You're painting, right? Well, you're not going to paint with your finger painting. You're going to use brushes. There are specific brushes made for hobbies. And we're not going to get into all the different brushes, but yeah, you'll need brushes. You'll need knives, pin vices, glue, paint, brushes, flock, sprays. You'll need sealants. You'll need, there's a lot of little minor things that you might not realize that you do need. Okay. Basically, you're going to need a lot of tools to work on everything I just listed is to work on your models. Okay, so we got that out of the way. Now, before you can start working on your models, before you can get your models, before you can even get started, it's the next bullet point. Reference. Okay, you need reference material. I mean, the internet's nowadays, the internet, back when I started, there was no internet. But today, there's internet. And so you can get almost everything you need from a website. You can scan the web. You can find out what the uniform colors are, what the strategies are, what the composition of the armies are, what some of the battles are that took place. You might want to recreate a specific scenario or a specific battle. Okay. There are books, tons of books out there. Read a book. There's the internet mentioned. There's movies. Believe it or not, you go to a movie, you watch a movie, it's a horrible production of a movie, but it doesn't matter because it's giving you ideas on those uniforms. The uniforms might be incorrect. Don't worry about it. You're just getting inspiration. Some movies are actually accurate, okay? Some movies have spent a lot of time doing a lot of detail work on their uniforms and their strategies and tactics and the knowledge. It might be a documentary you're watching. Okay, so movies. Your museum. You go to a museum, they might have some old uniforms, or like when I was in Berlin, we went to a museum and they had medieval knights, shields and armor and weapons all on display, and I got a lot of pictures and research from that. I mean, you know. Okay, then there's game books. The game book itself will have a lot of times will have pictures in there or whatever of units and you can copy them exactly, because guess why? If it's a historical game, they copied history. And if you're copying that, you're indirectly copying history. And guess what? That's why you play a historical game. You don't play a historical game to paint your guys pink and purple. I'm not going to take my German SS guys and paint them all yellow and have them go fight the battle. You know, that wouldn't be accurate, right? So now, the reference material is not just so that you can be compliant with the game. It's also because that's part of the game. Doing the research, learning, figuring it out, saying, oh my gosh, these Romans, they really knew how to kick ass. What? They had this shield that did this, or it's made out of this material and it's coated with this kind of paint and it's got this kind of fabric on it, or they used to wear sandals like this, or they used to walk 100 miles a day. You're learning. You're learning, and that's what military wargaming is about, is studying that time period. I'm going to tell you, I got into the Napoleonic period because there were so many different armies, so many different uniforms. Everything was colorful, and I wanted to have a good old time painting all different kinds of armies. What wound up happening was I learned about all these different nations. I learned about why they were in the war, where they fought, what their motivations were, what some of their battles were, and why those battles were fought. Now I consider, not an expert, but I know quite a bit about the Napoleonic period through wargaming because of research. That's why you get into wargaming. Okay, so get your reference materials. I've got a whole bookshelf of books. Now, why would I need a book? I'm going to tell you right now. Half the stuff you find on the internet is wrong. You're going to get on there and you're going to say, I'm going to do some research. I'm going to see how a Roman legion is painted. You're going to get a bunch of pictures come up, and some of them are right and some of them are wrong. You're going to have to really vet which ones are right and which ones are wrong. You can't just pick one and say, oh, I'm going to paint it just like that. It's all, you know, a Roman legion painted in multicam. No. I found that usually if it's a published book, it's accurate. And then sometimes not, but 99% it is. Look at the reference. In the book, it'll tell you what they've referenced and where they got their data. And it's usually accurate. Books tend to be better than just randomly Googling or banging on the internet. Okay. That's why I get books. The game books, the guys that made the game books, they put out scenario books or sometimes painting guides or whatever, but guess what? This is a printed book. Everything in here is going to be accurate. You're going to have like all these units and stuff like that painted. Yeah, you can copy those. There's nothing wrong with that. It's encouraged, actually, because if I bring a Roman army to a table and this guy brings a Roman army to the table, they should look the same. They shouldn't be, there can be some differences because even in the Roman army there were differences between the units. But if I bring an American paratrooper unit to the table and he brings an American paratrooper table to the unit, they should be the same. They shouldn't be different. So yeah, use your reference material. That's going to help you decide what models you're going to need, because you're going to say, okay, I need this. Legions normally fought with this, and they normally had that, and I might need I might need guys with swords. I might need guys with laser rifles, or I might need guys with whatever your reference material tells you that is accurate. But be wary, because if it's a game, a lot of times the game will put limitations on you and tell you what you're allowed to have and what you're not allowed to have. If it does, I'm going to say most games out there will put a limitation on you. Just go by the limitations. Hail Caesar, it says, hey, you got 300 points, spend 300 points on your army. Do that. Spend the points. Once you've spent the points, now you know exactly what kind of models you need to get. Order the models. Get the models in. Glue them together. Paint them. Put them on bases. Flock the bases. Just like you see on my Wargaming and miniature videos. You got to do that. That's half the fun. Okay. Now that you've got what you're going to do, the tools to do it with, and some reference material like guidelines, Now you need some supplies to play the game. Okay, so depending on the game, you almost always will need dice. Like using Hail Caesar an example, you need a bunch of D6. And it's just, that's a standard household dice you get from Monopoly or wherever. That's a D6. There are some games that require D10s, like D&D dice, or D20s, or D4s, or D8s, or whatever they are. Bolt Action has specific order dice. There are specific games have specific requirements on their supplies. Just check your rulebook. You're almost always, because it's a miniature game, you're going to need a ruler, because you're going to need to measure movements. You're going to need to measure ranges. A lot of people will use a tape measure. Some people will use your 1-inch school ruler. You can use any ruler. Some games will require that you have markers or tokens. So you can use little pennies out there, or you can use glass beads, or pipe cleaners, or anything, dice. You know, you can use anything as a token. Just know when you have the game and you look up to see what kind of tokens you need, get those. Okay, and then I have etc. on here. Okay, so they're probably, depending on the game, you might need additional supplies. Some games might need you to have cards. Some games might need you to have a roster sheet of what's in your army. Some games might need you to have, like Field of Glory, if I remember right, you had to make a screen in front of, between the two armies. He would set up on one side of the screen, you would set up on your side of the screen, then you'd pick up the screen and you'd see how each other are set up. It just depends on the game. Every game might have a specific supply that you need. But dice and rulers are the main thing you need. Get some dice, get some rulers, and then you should be good. All right, last bullet point. Last bullet point on how to get started in wargaming. We're going to go back up to bullet point 0. Why are you playing a miniature war game? The answer is always because it looks great on the table. There's 3 dimensions. There's research. There's knowledge. There's studying. What's the last thing on this bullet point? The battlefield. Okay, because you can't play a battle with just an army. You have to play a battle on a battlefield. So you're going to need a table or a floor or a gym or whatever. You're going to need to buy or build terrain. You can use some of my tutorials and build your own terrain. It's not hard. Or you can go to a shop and buy it pre-made. Or you can buy model kits, like from railroad companies, build them that way. Or you can pay someone to have one build one for you, which I would do for you. Get some trees. You can build your own trees, or you can use model railroading trees, or any other kind of hobby trees that you can find. Most popular things you need on the table are trees. That most battles took place outside of a city limits, usually in some kind of urban, rural area, usually with trees. Not always. Sometimes, like, you might be in the desert, or you might be on the moon, or who knows. But usually you need trees. You need buildings, because most battles are fought over some kind of an objective. Usually it's a town, a bridge, it could be a farmhouse. It's usually a man-made structure. You might need some hills to make the table contoured. You can use a sand table if you want, that's wild, or you can make hills that you can place on the table, or you can use things under a mat to make a hill. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways to make hills, but you'll need hills. Fences, walls, rivers, roads, etc., etc., etc. So you need to have a large variety of terrain. If you're lucky enough to be in a club or play at a game store that has terrain there for use, like on loan, on the shelves or whatever, then you're good. You don't have to worry about it because you can just use the terrain that they have. But if you are a hobbyist, a war gamer like I am, you're going to want to have your own terrain. You might invite your buddy over to come to your house, and now you're playing on a flat ping pong table. That's not good. I mean, it's okay. I mean, it's in a pinch. You can take a book out and say, this is a hill, and this is a water tower, or whatever, you can't see that. But you're like, this is a water tower, and I'm going to put my sniper on top. That's imagination. That's what I had to do when I first got started. But as you go along, you're going to want to turn this water tower paint bottle into an actual model of a water tower. You're going to want to take this book I put out there and said this was a city block, and you're going to actually want to build a city block. But just to get started, you don't really need to worry about it. But in time, you're going to want to buy or build your own trees, buildings, hills, fences, walls, rivers, roads, any type of thing that you might encounter, swamps, rock outcroppings, beaches. I can go on. Any kind of terrain on the table that your armies would be fighting over, that's what you need to get. Okay, so I hit every bullet point on how to get started into wargaming. Did I tell you which models to buy? No. Did I tell you how many to buy? No. What game to play? No. All of those things you have to figure out on your own, or with the help of your friends. If you're thinking about getting into gaming, and that's why you're watching this video, follow these bullet points. But really, really sit back and say, what period of time do I like? What scale do I think I want to play in? What rule system do I really want to get involved with? Once you've got those things answered, the rest will all fall into place. Okay, last bullet point is not a how-to or a it's not part of the tutorial. It's kind of a warning. Okay, this is a warning to new war gamers. You're going to spend a fortune. You're going to spend a lot of money on wargaming. You cannot pick up a game, buy miniatures, buy paint, buy glue, buy tools, buy terrain, build terrain, and play for under $100. Can never be done. I don't care what game it is. Can you do it under $200? $300? $400? Maybe. Okay. So, depending on the game you pick, you could literally spend tens of thousands of dollars. Literally. I'm not joking. I'm not saying that you have to spend it to start playing. Okay? Because you can start playing with probably $200. But over the course of time, you could literally spend tens of thousands of dollars on this hobby. Why do I say that? Because I've done it. I've done it. I'm just going to use one game as an example. And this one, I even did it in 15mm to cut the cost. 15mm Napoleonic, right? I play a game called Napoleon's Battles. It's done on the grand scale. I can do all of Waterloo. They can do all the British, because you have to have the British. You have to have the Brunswickers. You have to have the Dutch Belgians. You have to have the Nassau troops. You have to have the Prussians, the French. You have to have almost like 5 or 6 different armies. The British are there in force, so you need like 2 or 3 armies of British. You need like 3 armies of Prussians, and like 5 or 6 armies of French, okay, to play this game. I have every miniature needed to play Waterloo. I own that. How many miniatures is that? Probably about 1,500 to 2,000 models. Okay, you're saying, but Mr. Everything, in 15 millimeter, that's only going to be about $1,500 to $2,000. That's true. But then I have the hills for Waterloo. I have all the buildings that are at Waterloo. I have the game. I've bought the game like 4 times because it's gone through editions. Just as an example, Warhammer's on its 8th edition. And you got to stay current. You know, I've bought tokens, counters, the bases that the figures go on, tape measures, dice, templates. I bought, that's just one game, one battle. There were no Portuguese at Waterloo, but guess what? I got Portuguese to play Napoleonics in the peninsula. I need Spanish to play in the peninsula. I need Austrians. I need Russians. I don't have any Italians, but actually I do. I got 2 units of Italians. So that's just one game. And then I've played World War II games. That's my passion. I played 1/300 scale, 15 millimeter, 1/72nd scale, 28 millimeter. I probably spend another $5,000 on that, maybe more. And then I played naval, aviation with biplanes. I had a ton of biplanes. Basically, if you're getting into, this is my warning to you, if you're getting into miniature wargaming, it can, if you have a broad interest, like you love everything, because I love almost everything, not Civil War, not ancient biblical times. You can easily get caught up in buying, and buying, and spending, and building your armies over time. So remember, this is 40 years worth of collecting miniatures. So I bought D&D miniatures from day one, and then 1/72nd scale Airfix models got me into like World War II miniature gaming. And then later on, I got Warhammer Fantasy models with the big dragons and stuff, the D&D models, the hero clicks, with the Marvel and DC hero clicks. And then I bought 15 millimeter tanks, and I built terrain for every possible scale out there. My warning is, follow this guideline, pick a game, pick an army, and build it. And if you're like me and you like running and hosting games, which you can't know if you like it or not because you haven't played a game, or maybe you have and you just haven't jumped into buying the game or buying the miniatures, I have to, whenever I play any game at all, I have to have 2 armies. Why? Because I have to have my opponent as a guest who doesn't know how to play, doesn't have an army. hey, Joe Billy Bob Williams, do you want to play? I've got this Roman army. You can use the Roman army, and I'll use the Gallic army, or whatever, right? And that way you can get this guy excited about it. He can play the game, and then maybe he'll say, oh man, this is really cool. I want to build my own Roman army. Okay, so that's my warning. Don't spend too much. You can. It's real easy. You can become addicted to it like crack. There's a rumor in the wargaming community, not a rumor, a myth that there's a powder that game companies put in their molds. It's called mold release. They put it inside the mold so that when they put the pewter or the plastic into the mold, and then when they're getting ready, when it's all dried and hardened, they can pop the mold apart and they can pull this piece out easy. That mold release stays on the miniature, and that's why you've got to clean the miniature, because you got to get that powdery substance off of the miniature so that when you paint it, it'll stick to the miniature. So you gotta use a little bit of soap and water and actually clean the models before you start painting them. The myth is that mold release is like crack cocaine, and it causes you to want to buy more and more miniatures. But oh my gosh. All right, well, I appreciate you coming out. If you have any questions, you need to know something about how to get started into wargaming, you want to get started, you're not sure where to go or what to do or who to ask or what models or where to find these models, ask me. Drop it in the comments. I'll be glad to respond. If you're in the Clarksville, Tennessee area and you want to play and you want me to kind of show you in person, let me know. I'll be glad to link up with you and we'll play a game. If you just want to talk to me on the internet, I do have a Discord. I play a lot of times with my squadron or whatever in Discord. You can jump on there and ask me anything you want. Or I respond to my YouTube chats. You can find me on Twitter. I don't really get on Twitter, but I do get those messages, and nobody ever sends me anything directly on Twitter anyway. I just watch everybody else. I think on Twitter I might be a Kodo Derek, but I also have Facebook, which I never look at. So yeah, drop me a message on YouTube because I check that almost every day. All right, guys. I'll catch you next time.